Hello again, everyone, and welcome to Celebrity Stage Stories with Jerry Strauss. He is I am him. And of course, Celebrity Stage Stories is brought to you by Edge Magazine. Each issue of Edge explores a compelling cultural theme with an intriguing blend of essays, articles, interviews, artwork, photography, along with interviews with the biggest names in TV, movies, music, and more, like our guest here this week, of course. Visit Edge Magazine's website for free digital versions of the magazine, exclusive digital content, and more at edgemagonline.com, and follow them at Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram today. As for today's episode of CSS, we have got a big one. We love it when we have someone on the show and we kind of make a friend, and we love it even more when that friend comes back to visit us again. So we're so excited to welcome to the show someone we've grown to enjoy and love seeing each and every week on the runaway hit series for NBC, Young Rock. Of course, she plays Dwayne Johnson's Mama Atta Johnson. She is Stacey Leilua. Stacey is here. How are you?
I'm very good, thanks, Jerry, and glad to be back.
I'm so excited to have you. I mean, we just talked about this off the air, but you seem so happy and you sound so clear. And like we were saying last time we spoke, you were like in a pandemic bunker somewhere for a couple of weeks. And we were lucky just to be able to connect with you at all at that point because the world was insane and you get what you get. But now it's a whole new world, and you look and you sound great. So I'm excited for you just for that reason.
Yes, thank you. I think last time we talked, I was in an MIQ room I was back in Auckland, but I still hadn't been able to get out and see my family and get back to life. And so I think that's the difference. Now, season 2 has come out, and I think I've been home for maybe 2 months or something like that. And so I'm just back to living life, and clearly that's coming through and in my smile. So yeah.
Yeah, we're going to talk about it because I think a lot of us who follow the TV world, we kind of have a handle on how things go. Like when a season of a show is filmed domestically, it's usually a couple of months ahead of when we see it on TV, and we kind of know the schedule of when people are making the shows that we love. But it's such a different scenario for you, and we've got questions about it. So we're going to get there. This week is all about, well, obviously it's all about you, and we're excited to have you back, but it's also about all the listeners of our show and all the fans of yourself and Young Rock who responded to our call on social media. We said, Stacey's coming back, and we want you guys to host the show, basically. So we want your questions. We want to know what you want to know about Stacey, what you want to know about this show, the Young Rock, that has become sort of a sitcom staple for us every week. So, I mean, we're very excited. I think we've had about 5 episodes of season 2 air thus far at the time that we're recording this. And it just feels so right to have it be destination TV each and every week. Are you getting, like, do you feel that feedback through social media as people are starting to actually get to see these episodes that you created?
Yeah, definitely. Every episode that goes up each week, obviously I'm tuning in live and watching, but then I'll also be sort of flicking over. It's mainly Twitter, and I'm seeing the comments from people who are watching and the feedback, and it's just awesome to. I think the biggest change for this year is obviously there's been a lot more wrestling, so you see a lot of wrestling fans come out, and the comments that they make in terms of it's about the casting being spot on, and the portrayal of these characters, and I guess little tiny kind of Easter eggs and things that the general kind of fan base may not be aware of, but these guys are picking up on those little details, and that's what I've really tuned into with this season, and that's the part that I'm really enjoying the most, I think.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me because you've got this mainstream star and his life that this show is inherently about in Dwayne Johnson. Much like a lot of his career, he doesn't really have to lean into the wrestling side of what he's done. That's a pretty specific audience. But because he's such a, I guess he has so much star power that he's able to do that simply because there's a passion there for it. And he's pulling the show towards wrestling, and it's just driving the wrestling fans. Like, insane. I think you spoke about little Easter eggs and such, which is something you see in Marvel movies and Star Wars and things like that. But wrestling has its own rabid fan base. And I got to tell you, I'm so excited in all this social media hubbub of people sending in questions here. The most exciting thing that I received, I got a follow from Bowie Walton, who played
Oh,
little Roman Reigns a couple weeks ago on the show. And at first I'm like, wait, this kid is really young to have his own social media account, but I don't care, man, because little Roman Reigns, who I referenced on Twitter when I put out the call for this, but he actually was cool enough to follow me and to like my post. And yeah, they put out that Easter egg of Dwayne. That was Dwayne on the crux of training to be a pro wrestler, being challenged to wrestle in the living room by his tiny little cousin Joe, who would go on to be the future Roman Reigns. And just that comment of, yeah, no, this doesn't happen here. This is big enough that this has to happen at a WrestleMania in a year when it's so rumored that March 2023 in front of 80,000 people, WrestleMania next year is going to be Dwayne Johnson against Roman Reigns. It's insane that your show is feeding into this WWE world and making it another Marvel, making it another Star Wars, and lighting social media on fire.
oh, definitely that reference, the acknowledge me moment, like going and having a look on Twitter at that, like people were just going crazy. All the comments, like, wait, what did they just? Oh my gosh, I can't believe, da, 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 and it was really cool that that the show can kind of have that sort of impact and cross reference to something it's a generational kind of iconic event, and that's awesome.
It's really, and it's great. I mean, as a wrestling fan, there's so much for me, but there's so much just for people who want a good comedy or people who want a good story about a family, because we've seen so much of that and it's evolved, I think, so much from season one to where we are now. And like, we're seeing so much going on. We've got so many questions about everything we're talking about. So I want to get to them because people want answers. And for all of you checking this out, if you submitted a question, I had to do a lot of consolidating here. A lot of you sent in questions. A lot of you sent in very similar questions. So we're going to try to shout you out when we post the shows. But we're going to just kind of bust through all the different topics, and hopefully we're going to find out exactly what you were looking to discover in this conversation. So you guys are all a part of this. Thank you all for participating. The first question, and this is a good place to start: how has making season 2, how was it different procedurally than season 1? Because in season 1, I mean, you're just figuring out how to make this show again deeper in the middle of a pandemic. You're out there in was it filmed in New Zealand?
No, Australia. So season one
Okay.
was filmed in primarily in Brisbane, in Queensland, Australia. So primarily Brisbane was where the studio was based, but we also did a bit of sort of location stuff around and in the Gold Coast.
Mm-hmm. And it's so, I mean, even beyond that, and even beyond the fact that there's a pandemic going on, like it's just inherently a fragmented thing, because of course you've got the scenes of, I want to say present day, but it's actually in the future, of Dwayne himself running for president, and his scenes with Randall Park and that whole crew. And then it's the 3 different time periods that you're a part of, with Rock as a child, as a teenager, and then as a young adult, with different people involved in each one, but you one of the constants there. So what was the procedure like, again, going back to last season, and did it really change when you came back for season 2?
I would say that, and I can't remember whether we touched on this in our last chat, but I was very new I come from a theatre background. So coming into season 1 was a real, very steep and quick learning curve in terms of working on screen like that, in studios and all the cameras. So it's like something I had to kind of get used to,
Right.
very quickly. And that was one change I found for myself. Probably the main change was I just felt so much more relaxed coming into season 2, because I was very familiar with how things went. Like literally calls that were being made by crew, or think I'd have to. Last season, I was asking people like, "Hey, what does that mean when they say da 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 or whatever it was?" So I found that generally that makes me just kind of feel relaxed, so that I can be more in the moment with the acting without trying to constantly be like, okay, talk myself down to like a place of calm so that I can do the job. It was, I think, coming into it this season, I definitely felt that I was already at a certain level with that. So
Mhm.
that was good.
Yeah, I read a comment over the last day or two from the gentleman who plays Rocky Johnson, Joseph Lee Anderson, and he talked about how he was very nervous starting this role because it was his first regular series role, and how it took a certain number of episodes for him to really be able to relax and kind of lean into like who Rocky was, really trying to create this character. Was there a point where you were able to kind of feel yourself go from I'm just trying to keep my head above water to let's dive in and really have some fun with this?
Yeah, and again, I think that definitely comes with the sense of just general kind of being able to be relaxed so you can connect properly with your other actors, but also season one, and remembering that we're doing this through COVID, so there was no kind of group table reads or rehearsal. I mean, I think we sat down for one kind of read together with Nach, but then we're sort of straight into it. So it almost felt like we were kind of forming those relationships and getting to know each other in the early days of filming. Whereas, fast forward a year and we're all friends and everyone sort of loves each other and it's like a big family. So you naturally, I couldn't find myself in a scene with Joseph or one of the boys and just feeling like, oh, just feel so relaxed because I feel like I actually have a genuine relationship with you in real life. So it doesn't, not that it's forced, but if you don't have that, you're kind of calling on other things in your performance to generate that on screen. And it's really nice having and forming those relationships off screen so that it just feels a bit more genuine. And I think, the feedback that comes from audiences in terms of like the family dynamic and the chemistry has just been really nice to kind of affirm that. So, yeah.
Cool. Cool. Now, what was the gap between, and again, because we don't really have a sense maybe as tightly as when the pieces of this show are created versus, things we have more of a handle on domestically. I'm talking about here in the United States, but how long was it between filming season 1 and then filming season 2 for you?
It ends up being about 7 months. I think we finished filming season one in February, and then
Hmm.
I came back to New Zealand, and then we leave again in September. But bear in mind that for season two, we had the quarantine still in place to go to Australia. So there's
Mhm.
always the 2 weeks of sort of, being in prison, and then you can get out and actually start filming. Maybe the beginning of October, I think it was.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. Um, and look, these questions, no rhyme or reason to the order as well. So I'll warn you there. It's just welcome to the chaos in my head. Um, the relationship between Atta and Rocky is something that I think we're kind of honing in on more this season, the ups and the downs. And I know that we are on the cusp of seeing an episode where we're going to kind of go back and find out how perhaps how they met and see some of kind of the beginning of that relationship. But from what you could tell us now, without spoiling anything that we're going to see ahead of time, what do you think it about sort of the yin and yang of that relationship, the essence of each of you that made them such a good pair for a time? Because they're so different in the way they approach almost everything, but yet there is really truly this strong bond that we see as well at times. So what do you think is it that kind of brings them together when they are?
I think, they come from the same world, and there was a line that Atta said, I think it was maybe it was last week's episode when they were talking about Dwayne going into his wrestling journey,
Yes.
and she says that wrestling's in his blood from my side and yours, and it's such a I guess it's such a That's well, the world of the wrestling world is very it's exciting, but there's just all these characters and it's oh god, how do I it's almost like being an actor in a way. Like I think about my own partner who's also an actor,
Mhm.
and the world that you live in can sometimes be a bit like this. And so you speak the same language and you understand certain things. And I think a lot of that was what kind of held them in there.
Yeah.
So she grew up with a father who was a wrestler, her mum was a promoter. So she grew up in that world. And then Rocky's a part of that world. So that just fits in nicely. And so as time goes, and obviously with the arrival of Dewey, they have another common thing that holds them together. And they both really, really love him in their own different ways. But I think that that's one thing that does hold them together always, is that they want what's best for him.
Mhm.
And then maybe as he gets older and he can kind of find his way in the world, you've got these two people who sort of realize that, like, oh, okay, there's these other things in our life that are impacting us. We don't have any money, or the stresses of whatever it is.
Yeah.
When that's when the sort of cracks begin to show. But I would say it's kind of that they come from the same world and they speak the same language. And especially when Rocky is kind of at, we see in the Hawaii days that he's really at the height of his fame, and it's kind of like this intoxicating sort of situation that they live in, and everyone's looking at them like this power couple, and it's all of that. I think it's a mix of those kinds of things. Mm.
Gotcha. Okay. Um, Now, this plays into it a little bit, I think, but and again, without spoilers, I know there's still a lot to come, even in this season, and hopefully many more. But without giving anything fundamental away, how would you say so far from what we've seen that Ata has changed fundamentally throughout each of the three eras we've seen her? From what we've seen so far, like how do you approach playing her just a little bit inherently different from within the three eras as she gets a little bit older?
I would actually say fundamentally she doesn't change.
Mm,
It's the world around her that, like we touched on before, the sort of, I guess, peripheral things like the financial strains, or what in I'm just like, what have we seen and what haven't we seen? But like, what sort of happens with her mum, that's going to take a bit of a toll. Um, you know, the world that Rocky thrives in, but to the point where he's kind of on the road and things like that. But I've always sort of said with Utter at the core of it, and especially in terms of the show, is about the relationship and love that she has for her son. And so that being the driving force for me never changes, right from Hawaii all the way through to Tampa as a young adult. She's still, we've seen her sending the care packages and calling him all the time and make sure you're okay and all that sort of stuff. And I think fundamentally she's always that mum who loves her son and will do anything for him and wants to provide the best for him. And at the beginning, I think we see with Hawaii and with the money and fame and things, it's kind of easy to do that and ride this wave and look at this cool stuff that we've got, and we're rich now and we don't eat, we don't eat those kinds of potato chips or whatever that scene was.
right.
But that still is the same for her when we go to Nashville, and you've seen those hard times. And I love the scenes that I have with Bradley in that time period, because we see the exterior world kind of testing what that is. But
Mhm.
Utter is still that woman. She's still that mother who wants to keep her son on the straight and narrow, because now we started to shoplift or like be, chasing the girls, and she has to kind of bring him in line. And so it's a different way of doing that, but it's still fundamentally the same mother who loves her son and just wants the best for him. So
I will say, going back to what you mentioned before about maybe seeing some cracks here and there in the relationship. The episode that you mentioned earlier from a week or two ago, where Dwayne first decides he's going to become a professional wrestler, I absolutely loved the one moment where he asks Rocky to train him. Rocky refuses before reluctantly agreeing, and you take him into this room, and you like you just kind of bust in and you're just like, hey man, and he's like, hey man, and I love that because to me that is like maybe a very very subtle way that your character has fundamentally changed within that relationship, in that I feel like in the younger days it's very much you're doing a lot of covering up for him and being very understanding of, all the stuff that Rocky would constantly kind of do to make your life interesting, so to speak. But it feels like there's a little bit of a loss of patience by the time we get to that period of your life. And I
Yeah.
just love that because it's earned. I mean, who could blame you for being a little short at times, um, with everything that he tries to get over and, working the gimmick and such, so to speak. So I love that moment.
Yeah, that was a very fun scene to film. I mean, all that I quite enjoy the dramatic moments because it's a comedy, and so we get a lot of the funny stuff or the sort of nice, heartwarming things. But every now and then we'll get a scene that's written, But it's the thing I love about that scene is that again, genius writers who they make us laugh by the end with the comments about I changed his diapers, and she's like, you changed his what now, or and it's I'm
Yeah.
just left with this sense of like, oh, haha, and like we love them as a couple and they work so well together, but it's still bringing home that message of them kind of, I guess, butting heads a little bit with that. So yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Um, to your knowledge, and this is something that I would imagine has to come up in different conversations throughout your time making both seasons, how important is accuracy as far as relating to Dwayne's actual life? Like, is there a lot of back and forth about minute details, or, this didn't happen this way, it happened this way, or I wouldn't have worn this, I wore that. Like, how fine is the attention to those details?
Um, I would say that's not really my department. First of
Okay.
all, I think those are the conversations that obviously the writers and Natch and the execs are having directly with Dwayne, and then that gets kind of fed to us. And so we're definitely asking the questions every now and then. And I think I've touched on this before that there's been times that we've got Brian Gewitz there with us on the ground, and I would be asking him, "Did this really happen?" And you think it's made up, and he's like, "Yep, yep, this is a true story." And we're like, "What?" So it's a really I think audiences would be surprised to actually know what was true and what was kind of embellished on. Um, but again, sometimes it's a tonal thing. Like Dwayne has touched on himself about the struggles that they went through, and especially with relation to Ata and the very real kind of moments of just I guess struggle and pain that they went through as a family, her as an individual. And in terms of the show, they have to kind of stay true to that, but not, we can't have, big sort of scenes of like the reality of it, because it has to sort of fit I guess the mold of what the show is. So I feel like a lot of the times it's taking whether it be like the core message or the feeling from a moment or a story, and then writing the scene around that. We saw the eruption that sort of happened out of the car in Nashville, and for anyone who knows that story about Utter, getting out of the car and walking, it was a lot more than that, but it has to sort of fit in.
Yeah.
I guess the frame of the show. So yeah, hope that
Yeah.
answers your question.
Well, to your point also is to fit the frame of a show like this, there has to be a certain amount of comedy involved in everything, and
Yeah,
some jokiness. And I mean, it's a hilarious show,
yeah,
even beyond all the heart and all the emotion, and staying true to the drama in this story as much as they can. But I think it's also a testament to the fact that they assembled a team, a cast, all of you guys that are all, I mean, at this point, you've all proven capable of being able to be hilarious on this show, and also being able to pull off these emotional, dramatic moments. Like, it's an entirely um, a flexible show that can go in any direction at any time, and everyone is capable of pulling it off and making it seem really credible. So I think I think that's why we keep coming back every week, because you never know exactly what you're going to get or even which part of
Right.
the story you're going to get, but you know it's going to be good.
Yeah. No, I'd have to agree with you on that. It's definitely, it keeps you on your toes as an actor, and then as you're watching the show, it's just it just keeps the show being really interesting. It's like a roller coaster, you know.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and it's great to watch. Great TV.
Yeah. Let's move on. We got more of these here. So your character, Ata, going back to the beginning, and I think we talked about this a little bit last time, but how familiar were you with her, beforehand, and then, doing research? How was your take on who she was as a person and how you would portray her? How was that crafted?
Yeah, the I think we did touch on this last time, and I said that after I had been cast, we had a Zoom call, so I got to sit and talk with DJ and Utter for maybe about an hour, and that conversation is one that I always keep coming back to and watching. Um, it was, I guess, I was very aware. I mean, obviously, you're playing a real person, and that person is very alive and and also visible in the world.
And watching
And
you on
watching you,
TV every week.
exactly. So all those things, of course, come into play, and I didn't want to get into sort of like a copy of her, because I kind of think it's a little bit. Well, sorry, I keep jumping in. The thing for me was remembering as well that Utter is not the central character. The central character is Dwayne. So going, I guess, forming the character and thinking, what is the role that she plays in relation to Dwayne? And like we've said before, she's um, his mother. She provides the heart of the storytelling, and um, I guess it was always that kind of supportive force that's there and encouraging him and keeping him on this path to hopefully success. Um, Watching her in this video, tuning into Dwayne's social media, where he quite often will post videos of her, um, getting a sense of, I guess, like her energy, the way she talked, mannerisms, her relationship with Dwayne in terms of how she is with him. She's very tactile. He quite often will come in for a hug, or she still will like kiss him on his forehead, or and he's like, I think 50 or something. And those little things are just all um, nice little, um, I guess, markers to hold on to when you're kind of crafting a performance. And then you've got the relationship with Joe as Rocky, and how he's crafted that character. And like I said, we didn't really have much time before getting into filming to kind of bond with each other in that way. So it was kind of trying to get through that in the scenes. I mean, she's a Samoan woman. She's a mother, and she reminds me a lot of women in my life that I've grown up with.
Mhm.
Um, Yeah, I always kind of say it's a bit of a melting pot of like all of those things when putting the character together, but I didn't want to, I guess, try and copy the person that she was exactly. It was more about the essence of who she was as who she is as a mum, as a woman.
Do you you mentioned the conversation that you had with her and with Dwayne. Do you get any direct uh requests from her when you're talking with her? Hey, make sure you do this because this is how I do this. Is does she, nothing
No,
like
thank
that?
goodness. Thank goodness. Um, no, not specific things. I think there were a lot of similarities in our kind of life stories as mothers, that I was able to relate to, because when she was sort of talking about, I guess, yeah, like we talked about the struggles and things, and there was a period in my life that I was a sole parent, so a lot of the things she'd talk about, I'm like, yeah, I know exactly how that feels. I did exactly that same thing only a few years ago, so it's also kind of drawing on that. And I think when you've got these scenes of there was a scene in season 1 that I always come back to again with Bradley. It's that time period I find quite interesting because there's a shift there in the dynamics of the relationship. And it was when she finds out that he's been stealing, and they sit down on the couch and she talks to him, kind of straight as an adult. This
Yeah.
is kind of what we need to do. And yeah, I go back to that scene, and I've lost what I was going to say.
No,
And so,
we're talking about, about being Atta, crafting Atta, being evolving as to how you're portraying her. And yeah, I mean, going back to that scene, and I guess maybe relating that to what you guys talked about as parents.
yeah, and in that Zoom call that we had, without kind of going into detail, but there were moments that we were crying over things and laughing over things, and
Mm,
um that sort of stuff is something that I guess I always come back to. I get the scripts and I'm reading through, and it's kind of going, okay, this is sort of where we're at, and yep, here's the comedy bit, and here's the sort of jokey stuff, but behind it, it's always going back to that conversation and going, okay, this is the time in her life when sort of these things were happening. So how would she have been feeling? And we know kind of what happens in the past and in the future. So it's it's kind of like a big mix of all of that sort of stuff. That makes sense. Oh, I'm really not good at
oh,
answering this question.
no, 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 no. It makes sense. You're,
But
true
she was
artists.
gracious enough to not be oh, I wouldn't do that. We don't do this. Or she just kind of allowed us to do the thing. And then I remember after season 1, she sent a video message to us, and
Mm,
just thanking us for the portrayal of herself and her family, and just sort of how spot on it was. And that for
mm.
me was, it was just, those are the people that you care about. That's what you want to hear, that feedback from her and from Dwayne. And then you go, okay, cool, we're on the right track, and continue.
Yeah, yeah. No, nobody better to evaluate, right?
Oh, exactly.
um, Now, this is off topic, but were you a wrestling fan at all before Young Rock came into your life?
No.
Okay. So this is quite a way. I mean, especially this season, as you said, a lot more wrestling this season. Um, and I know you were there for, that episode where Dwayne starts training to be a wrestler. You were there and part of those scenes where you're filming he and Rocky training in the boxing ring and such. Uh, that had to be, I'd imagine, a bit of an eye-opening experience for you, because I feel like they must have been going through a lot of stuff for a long period of time just to get that little bit of footage, right?
Yeah, I mean, even before that, like season 1, I remember, I forgot the name of it, but the big wrestling match where they all kind of piled on Andre, and watching that.
A
We
battle
filmed that,
royal. Yep.
yeah, Battle Royal, that's it. We
Mhm.
filmed that over maybe 2 days, and I feel like that was, probably the first time I'd kind of seen all the boys in action.
Mhm.
And that moment was the eye-opening moment for me, because watching the actors who didn't have stunt doubles, like these boys are just doing it all themselves for
Wow.
2 days, and watching what they were doing, and they had, Chavo Guerrero as the wrestling coordinator, just watching them. And like, it's I'd never kind of gone, oh, it's not real, it's fake, but you just sort of go, oh, it's kind of coordinated, or maybe they do this, or maybe they sort of do that. And all of that kind of thought went out the window watching them do it. I was like, nah, this is for real. These guys are amazing, and these are actors who are sort of doing it. There's no one there who's kind of done this for years and years. These guys are doing it themselves, jumping off the ropes, throwing their bodies on the thing, and you'd see it. They'd have bruises. That some of them would sort of get grazes every now and then. I'm just like,
Sure.
that's incredible. Rolling out of the rope, falling on the ground, and again and again and again. It's just like watching Joseph do his do that sidekick thing that Rocky does. Like,
Mhm.
that's amazing, the height that he gets. Like, that was the moment for me that I was like, yeah, this is definitely for real, and it's incredible. And like, hats off to each and every one of those boys for doing that, because I couldn't.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing, and wrestling fans are familiar with Chavo Guerrero and the work, his wrestling career, but also he was a big part of the Netflix hit Glow, and he's got this whole second half of his career, this reputation for being the kind of Hollywood stunt guy behind all these wrestling related projects, where it's not like hokey stuff that they're just kind of getting away with just to get something inside a ring. Like, he is having these actors wrestle, like do real moves, and it's like this very advanced, realistic, the type of wrestling and physicality that you'd see on TV, and it's really cool. It's really satisfying for a wrestling fan to be able to see wrestling portrayed on a TV show like Young Rock the way wrestling actually is. And kudos to all the actors for being a part of it, because they're the ones who have to get in there, as you said, and take the bruises and learn how to do all this stuff the right way, because that's the standard now.
That's right. And watching Chavo work with the boys and having to sometimes change things, in the moment, and sort of change angles or whatever it is. And he just sort of does it seamlessly. And then he'll kind of demonstrate something. And, he's wearing jeans. And I'm like, how do you do that? Like, it's incredible. I just got to do this, change things around, just sort of sitting there watching, just going, wow, it's, it's amazing to watch.
This next question is something you already touched on, the idea of creating this sense of family among your family. And I'm going to extend that and say it's not just between, the few of you who actually portray family, but just that overwhelming sense of family and community with your mom on the show, with all the wrestlers, because that too is clearly a community and a family. What do you guys do beyond just the experience of acting and working together? Is there anything that your cast has done over this period of time to kind of build that rapport and build that feeling of closeness among you?
I mean, just hanging out. I think because there's especially for season 2, there's such a big cast. People sort of find their pockets of friends or whatever it is, and it's hanging out. It's going out to dinner. We usually have some kind of chat group where put things in there, and who wants to go out for dinner tonight? I'm going down to the da-da-da place, and maybe 5 or 6 of us will go, yeah, keen, and go and do that. I think there's sort of definitely something to be said for filming in a pandemic where you can't go home.
Yeah.
So for 2 years now, every time we film, we're all put here, and then we're sort of stuck there until we're finished. And people come and go, depending on the size of their role.
Mm-hmm.
But while you're there, and I think, I always sort of feel a sense of, I guess it's a responsibility to kind of hold that space in a family sense. And this may be a Samoan values kind of thing, or maybe it's a New Zealand thing, I'm not too sure. But being an established role in the show and then coming back in for season 2, I was just very aware of kind of, as much as I could anyway, being welcoming or talking to anyone if we were sort of in the makeup trailer or seeing new people on set, go and introduce yourself and da-da-da. And by the end of filming, a lot of the new faces that we had on would talk about, this job and being part of this crew and the set is one of the best experiences that they've had. And these are guys who have been working in the industry for 20 plus years. And that was really special to me, because I don't know, I kind of, I feel a sense of responsibility to Dwayne and Utter to be like that, if that makes sense. Like, I want to hold this space for people to come into work, so that it's a really nice environment to be in, and we're creating the show that everyone loves to be a part of, as opposed to, you hear some horror stories and I'm like, why would people want to be like that? Like, don't we all want to be friends and family? And I think that's a huge part of it, is everyone kind of buying into that vibe. And this goes for the crew as well. And we've had new crew and working with us this year, and everyone's just been awesome. And I think that's the collective kind of vibe, is that everyone knows that this is how we roll with Young Rock, and it's just nice.
And it's so weird as a viewer, and you may be able to speak to it differently as a performer, but I feel as just a fan of TV that you can feel that when you're watching the show. You can feel just like this sense of people being comfortable with each other and having fun. And maybe we're all crazy, but I honestly feel that there are times when you kind of just get those vibes, and it makes you feel comfortable watching them. And Young Rock is certainly a show that very much exudes that. Um, you talked about some of the things that you had in common in your personal life with Ada. Um, what are some things about the character, or one or two main things that jump out at you that make you very different from her, or vice versa?
Well, I always go back to season 1 and the singing.
No.
Singing and the ukulele. Yeah, that was definitely something that I had to really focus in on and put a lot of work into learning and feeling comfortable doing that because I'm not. So that
No.
would be a big thing. Yeah, and I mean, it's those, and again, like her involvement in the wrestling world, I guess, would be another huge thing. That all this is all stuff that I had to learn and research and, become passionate about myself. Whereas with her, that's her world. She literally grew up on it, and yeah, it was those kinds of things, I think.
Not to genderize it, but especially back in those days, this was very much a man's world.
Yeah.
And she was very, because she grew up in it, she was very comfortable, even stepping into the point where now she has to run the locker room and such. There's a level of comfort where she's used to it. Is that something you can relate to? Would you be comfortable in a situation like that?
I mean, yeah, I guess so. I don't know. The only thing I can kind of relate it to is I think back to drama school and um, we had sort of this overwhelming the males in the class as opposed to the females. But well, I mean, but even filming Young Rock actually, because
Yeah.
there's really Anna, myself. Last season we had Lexi.
Yeah.
That was kind of it. And then this season, we've got a few other female cast members, but predominantly there's just boys everywhere. Maybe that's a bit of that, but yeah, feel very comfortable with it.
Okay. Um, I put this one off till near the end because this is kind of a downer of a question, so I apologize,
Goodness.
but I'm so sorry. But it's an interesting one as well, because and for those of you, by the way, who watch the show and are not familiar with the details of this story of Dwayne's life, his parents' life, etc., I'm going to warn you now. You might want to just fast forward 5 minutes, because I mean, it's real life, so it's not a spoiler, but maybe it is for you. So, in the interest of being polite, but I just want to ask you, because we know, those of us who know how this story goes in real life, there's an inevitable uh crash of this marriage. Rocky and Ata. We see the cracks, as we've been saying throughout this conversation, but we know that there is an end. It's years away at this point from what we're portraying right now, but it's there. It's a part of this story. Does that weigh on you at all, as far as knowing that you're telling the story, that this aspect of it is headed towards some doom and gloom? Like, is that something that kind of affects you now in your portrayal, in telling the story of this relationship, or something you worry about or brings you down in any way, or is it not an issue yet?
No, it's not an issue yet, and I think when I think about how we film the show as well, maybe it's also because we film 3 parts of the life.
Mm,
So sometimes we will literally cover 2 time periods in a day. So you're never really sort of sitting too long in a time period, if that makes sense. Sometimes we'll be, Hawaii in the morning and then being aged up for Tampa in the afternoon, or so. And again, I guess it's going back to the format and the world of the show, is that it is a comedy. So I would like to think that when we do get to covering that part, if
yeah.
we do, it will be handled with the same way that they've handled, the other hard times in the past. And it's always well, first and foremost, it's always in a respectful kind of way because we're dealing with someone's real life and real stories.
Sure.
But like I said, they always find a way to make it kind of heartwarming or funny. Like there's humor in these scenes. And I guess it's trusting that, the execs and Natch and the writers all will continue to work in that vein. That doesn't make me kind of go, oh, what's going to happen? It's like, no, they've got it. And I feel safe in those hands.
That's great. That's great. And I'm glad we went down to those levels because we've got one more question for you. And based on your answer, I think we have an opportunity to pick things up mood wise. So this is all on you now.
Oh, good.
2 seasons now. You're in the middle of season 2 of Young Rock. How has your life changed? Because you started this out in the pandemic. Now there's some freedom. You're out there in the world a little bit. Tell us some exciting stories. Has there been a parade in your honor? Have you been able to go to the front of the line at for a roller coaster at the grocery store? VIP section at the club, like what?
No, like I'm too old for the clubs, Jerry. That's the first one. New Zealand's so they're just low key, I think. And I think I was talking to the American cast, and they're like, man, if you were in LA or something, just walking down the street, you'd be stopped and people would recognize you. But it's just not like that here, and I love that. I love that I can just go down to the supermarket. And maybe it's a bit of, wearing a mask up to here as well. Like you can just get around. No one knows who I am, and that's awesome. In terms of my personal life, the changes, obviously the show brings a lot of opportunity in terms of what you can kind of, I guess, afford to do, which is really nice because like I said, I was a sole parent really just up until a few years ago. So I remember the days of going to the supermarket and checking my bank balance to make sure I had enough money in there to like get the week's groceries, and little things like that on a daily basis. I go, I don't need to worry about things like that anymore, which, in turn kind of just puts you in a good mood. You feel a little bit more relaxed and you can just kind of put your focus into things that matter in your life. And the show and the world of the show and the people that I've met has been awesome. New friends, working with new amazing directors and writers, and that sort of stuff just inevitably encourages you with your own work. Going into a little bit of theatre work here in New Zealand in the off break, which is nice. And I go, oh yeah, cool. Just taking sort of skills and continuing them along in other work, and it's just all learning and growing, and I'm just really grateful for it all.
It's really great, but I gotta say, I feel like if I had my druthers and I could just take over your life for 3 days, I would say you need to book a trip. I know you don't seem to be yearning for the LA scene, but spend like 3 days there, just soak it in because you've earned the right to be rushed by TMZ on the street. You've earned the right to be hounded and harassed by paparazzi. And I feel like you don't want to pass that opportunity up. Like now is the perfect time. I don't know what airline rates are like, but just get yourself a flight, take the whole family so everyone can see because
we've been rushed by the paparazzi. Look, you did mention the smile at the beginning, and it's because I'm just comfortable in New Zealand in my home with my family, drinking a cup of tea and going, no paparazzi to be seen.
Okay. Fair enough. So, okay. Well, I mean, thank you so much for answering everything about everything that everything has asked you and everyone has asked you about because it really came from everywhere. Great to catch up with you. Where would you like, or I mean, this is kind of a tricky question. Do you want anyone to follow you anywhere on social media or know anything that you're doing or have any thoughts about you in their head ever? Or do you just want to hide out? This is all up to you.
Oh, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter, and I'm just I don't mind that as long as it doesn't become kind of weird and invasive. I'm like, it's a little bit,
Social media, weird and invasive? Nah, you're
well,
fine.
in terms of the comments and so they do get a bit weird sometimes. I'm like, ugh. But the great thing I love about having a platform like that is to be able to, um, put my culture out into the world, talk about being Samoan. Sometimes things come up, or New Zealand culture, Maori culture, whatever it is. Suddenly, there's
Mhm.
thousands of people who go, "Oh, what's that?" Or whatever that is, and that's how I see that kind of thing. So I think people use it for whatever they want to use it for, and for me, it's about being able to have a voice that people might want to listen to when it comes to anything, issues, themes that we run in the show. That kind of stuff is what's important to me, I think. So
Okay.
if people want to tune into that and have a look and what I'm up to, then sure, go for it.
And of course, tune into Young Rock wherever it may be, whatever it may be, wherever you may be across the world. Check it out on Hulu. Catch up from season 1 on if you have not yet done so. And we're going to continue this ride. Hopefully, we've got a lot more coming up this season. And as we said, hopefully, many more years of seeing you as Ata to come. So thank you again, and congratulations on everything that's going on with you, your success so far on the show.
Thanks, Jerry. Good to chat, mate.
And thank you to all who come each and every episode here, Celebrity Stage Stories. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for sending in questions. And thank you for being friends. All of you. We'll see you next time on CSS. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Stacey.
Thank you.